What is up, everybody? I have a very special guest, Vinnie Parise, joining me today, and you are on the Blackhawks beat as well as New Jersey Devils and the Bears beat. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you got all three of those and just kind of your journey into sports
So
supremacy?
it's actually like a long, crazy story. I had a tweet go viral in like 2018, I want to say. It was Wayne Gretzky's birthday. And or no. It was the anniversary of the day Wayne Gretzky was traded to the Kings by the Oilers. That's what it was. And NHL Network posted a tweet. What would it take in the modern NHL to acquire Wayne Gretzky from the Oilers? And I replied, probably just Adam Larson. Because like a month beforehand, the New Jersey Devils traded Adam Larson to the Edmonton Oilers 1-for-1 for Taylor Hall. Well, that was the popular topic of conversation. So it kind of went a little viral. Fanside had found me. I applied and I started working for them. And it kind of just over time developed, and I started doing the Devils. And then they have All Chicago site that I started working for a lot. They kind of did All Chicago from like a general scope. So I'm doing the Bears, the Cubs, the White Sox, the Blackhawks, obviously. The Bulls here and there, they had better basketball minds than me to cover the Bulls. I did a couple pieces here and there, but then it elevated into being on the White Sox site. And so I'm doing the White Sox beat. I did that for like 4 years. And so I would mainly say the teams I wrote about the most were the Devils, White Sox, Bears, and Blackhawks. And it kind of transformed into what we have today, where I got a job at the Hockey News and I cover the Blackhawks. I'm no longer with Fansided outside of doing some Devils work here and there. And it turned into podcasting a little bit with the Let's Go Devils podcast network, the Barroom network a little bit here and there too. And so, yeah, the Hockey News. And then I kind of had an itch to do some Bear stuff. And I became a tributor with USA Today's Bears Wire. Working over there has been really cool. I'm not on the beat necessarily per se like I am with the Blackhawks, where I'm just on every single move no matter what. More just general opinions, some quotes from Ben Johnson, writing up stuff like that. It's more for fun than anything, but it's nice to have a little extra side hustle too. So that's where all that comes in.
Those sports or teams, who is your most passionate team that you cover?
It's probably good that I stepped away from covering them just a little bit. Like I still write here and there, like I said, but it's the Devils, the New Jersey Devils. I've been a diehard Devils fan for I don't even know how long. It's been a long time. 15 plus years. I was small. I'm 30 now. It was probably when I was still in elementary school that I really started getting into it. Obviously, Zach Parisi, superstar. When he was on the team, he was one of the best players in the league. He had 94 points, I think it was, in 2009-10, the year the Hawks won their first of three cups. And then I started going to games and, became a diehard fan of the sport in general. But yeah, I would say my number one team is the Devils. And then I'll give an honorable mention to the Bears and the White Sox. I love them as my Chicago teams. I try to cover the Blackhawks objectively, so I kind of, I try to let my fanhood, evade me a little bit on that. I say I'm a Devils fan. I'm a diehard Devils fan if I had to pick a team in the NHL. And then, yeah, so that's where my pro sports fandom lies. It's all about the Devils and then, the White Sox and the Bears on the side.
Who do you think wins the Stanley Cup first, the Devils or the Blackhawks?
Better be the Devils. And it's nothing against where I think the Blackhawks are at or what I think of them as a fan. At the end of the day, I would still say I'm like, I appreciate them. They're a big reason I got into hockey. It's more because the Devils are kind of entering their window of now.
Mhm.
Jack Hughes is going to be 24 years old. That's where he should really start to turn up he's already kind of started to turn up the heat in his early 20s after kind of a slow start in his teenage years. And when he was 20, after COVID, he really, really, really started to turn into a superstar. They have Heischer. I think he's 25 or 26 now. If you consider an NHL player's prime from being 25 to 32, then he's really entering it. Same thing with Bratt. Luke Hughes is still pretty young. There's still a lot of work to do with his defensive game, but the offensive skills are through the roof. They have Meyer. They have Hamilton. They traded for Markstrom. They're just in a prime position to compete. And I think if we got to the point, and I think the Blackhawks are still pretty far away. So if the Blackhawks won the cup first, that probably means the Devils aren't getting one with this core. which is something that would really, really sting. I obviously want it to happen, and nothing's guaranteed. It's very hard to win the Stanley Cup. I think since the Devils last made it to the Cup, which was in 2012, so we're going well over 10 years, I think only 6 teams have won the East since. So, it's very difficult to even make it there, let alone win it. So, yeah, I would have to say it better be the Devils who win it first out of the two.
So like the Devils kind of had what the Blackhawks are going through now, where they had Nico, Jack Hughes as number one picks, and then Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, and then they had like Salayev, who's another top 10 pick. So can you tell me a little bit about like what you were feeling during that rebuild time, as well as like the similarities the Blackhawks have? Because like Jack Hughes, Connor Bedard, like you have your franchise players, and then you got to like roll out your contributors. So like, what is the difference between a lot of these teams that do rebuild and have those top draft picks a lot of years, like New York Rangers and teams like that?
Yeah, I actually think they're a lot more similar than people realize, New Jersey and Chicago, because both of them wasted about 5 years too. I do think each team, so the Devils made it to the Cup in 2012, and then that offseason after losing to the Kings in the final, Zach Parisi signs with Minnesota. Kovalchuk comes back, plays 1 year, retires. Clarkson, who had 30 goals the year going into this offseason, he's off to Toronto. Elias is getting old. Adam Henrique was a good prospect, but nobody ever thought he was a superstar product. I think he had 30 goals once. Brodeur was on his way out. He's getting into his 40s. He's still pretty good at 41 years old, but you're not going down the long-term road. And I think they tried to like patch it along the way. Dina Zubris wasn't the player that he once was. Zajac wasn't the player that he once was. Same with Andy Green, as they kind of moved him more into a veteran leadership defensive defenseman role. And then they tried to patch it, and they traded Larson for Hall. Adam Larson for Taylor Hall. It was 1-for-1. They made the trade. They traded the 9th overall pick when it was clearly all their best players were either leaving or retiring within the next 3 years. They traded the 9th overall pick to Vancouver for Corey Schneider, who's one of the best goalies in the league at this time. And because they have Schneider, they don't give up a lot of goals. I think there was a year where they were like top 10 in goals against, but they were bottom 2 in goals for, and they were always the 6th worst team in the NHL for like 5 years in a row, including the McDavid and the Matthews draft. And they took Zaka 6th overall in the McDavid draft. I think they took he who must not be named with the Hockey Canada scandal 11th overall. They traded back and took him with that pick in the Austin Matthews draft. McAvoy was still on the board. There was some bad drafting and some bad management of where they were as a franchise from about 2015 to 2020 or 2019, I'll say. And then they got a couple number 1 picks. They got Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes. That turned out to be a 6th round gem. You don't see really often that happen at all, which would be another thing that frustrates me if they don't end up at least making it to one final with this core, because how often do you go through an era where you find a guy in the 6th round who could be 80 plus points every single year? And, the Hawks kind of went through the same thing. I don't think they have a Hischier. Can Connor Bedard be as offensively prolific as Jack Hughes? Yes. I don't think he's as good of a skater as Jack Hughes, but I also think Jack Hughes doesn't have Connor Bedard's shot. So, it's one of those things like they could each be 110 max level guy. I think, high end superstar number 1 center in the NHL. If Frondell turns out to be a diet Hischier, but they're talking about him playing wing. I don't know if I want that. I think you'd rather move Nazar to wing if Frondell turns out to be that 2-way guy that everybody thinks, he can be. We'll see. But the fact that each team went from being really good, and the Devils didn't win 3 cups in 6 years in the later stages, but people forget I think it was from 94 to 2012, they made the playoffs in 24 out of 25 years or something like that. I think it was 14 out of 15 years in a row that they made the playoffs. And, they did win 3 cups in that sequence. So they kept trying to patch it up, and eventually things finally started to turn around. But there were some bad years. Jack Hughes had 21 points as a rookie. It's a lot less than Connor Bedard's 60 points that people are freaking out about when he was 18. And so it's painful. It's long. It takes time, especially with defensemen. And that's where Chicago has kind of shined in the last couple of years. I actually think they've been better than most of the young teams in the league at developing and drafting defensemen. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, there's a lot of pain. I still think there's probably one more year of pain coming for Chicago, and by pain, at least they'll be entertaining this year. I think there's going to be a lot more reason to want to watch with this new staff and with kind of the new guys coming along. But yeah, those are kind of where I see the things being somewhat similar.
I wanted to like take a look at the in the system for the Blackhawks and just ask you if there's any players on here that you think are overlooked and are higher on your rankings for the prospects than other people. I know that most of the prospect system is already playing in the NHL in some way, or they're not on here, like Sam Renzel. You have no Frank Nazar, obviously Connor Bedard, but out of these guys like Boivois, Kanserov, Lardis, Frondel, Mason West, Vaslav Nestrasil, is there any guy that you think kind of goes overlooked in this system?
I would rank. Is he even on there? I don't think you don't have NHL guys on there. So, like I was gonna say, Sam Renzel, I think is the number one prospect in the system, and people will put Levshinov or Frondell, and I understand that. I think Rinzel's the number one prospect in the organization. I love the way he plays. He kind of plays a style that I think can turn into a number one defenseman in the NHL. I think Levshinov very well could too. I like the tools that Rinzel has, and he played college hockey, and he was a project when they took him, and people were a little like, why'd they take Sam Rinzel in the 20s? Why'd they trade back in, to make a third pick in the first round? And now you're kind of seeing the fruits of their developing labor. The University of Minnesota did a good job. But as far as the guys who haven't played a single game in the NHL that were on the original screen, I look to Lardis, Nick Lardis. So things he did with goal scoring in 2024-25 were just amazing. And, it's not like playing in the Ontario Hockey League is easy. It's not like scoring 71 goals just happens every single year for a guy. It never happens. And so do I think he's going to be this offensive dynamo that, has 110 points in the NHL? I really don't, because I'm not sure. He had 46 assists in 65 games with Rockford this year, or with with Brantford. I'm seeing Rockford on the screen. He's probably going to play for either Rockford or Chicago this upcoming year. To put up that many goals, I think he's getting recognized a little more now because of the prolific goal scoring numbers that he turned out. But I think even coming into this year, I was a little bullish on him, and I'm glad he did what he did because he has certainly been impressive. And then I'll throw one more at you. I really like Boisvert. I watched a lot of his games with North Dakota last year. I'm a big fan of college hockey, especially the NCHC and the Hockey East. I watch a little bit of Big Ten too, but I'm really into Hockey East and the NCHC. And seeing Boisvert play as well as he did on a North Dakota team where he was one of the younger players and he turned into, the two-way centerman that I think he kind of wants to be. And so, being a Devils fan, I know Jay Pandolfo all too well. I think every year he's been involved with BU, either as a player or a coach, they made it to the Frozen Four. So I'm pretty sure it's like 9, something crazy like that. And they'll have a chance to do it again this year. And I think Boisvert is going to be a big part of what they do as a forward group this season.
Whenever I look at Boisvert, what he did this year, I always try to go to the like what his team did because they weren't like this powerhouse who was scoring a ton of goals. I wanted to take a look at like Jaden Perron, who has always been known for his skill, his playmaking ability. He only had 19 points in 31 games. It was kind of surprising that Boivois was leading his team in points as a freshman, as well as EJ Emery was a player that a lot of people in the like fan base wanted during his draft year, and he had 1 assist in 31 games. Obviously, he was selected by the Rangers, I believe. Like it was close to his range. What 20? What was it? 30 overall. And I remember people talking about him in the 20s last year. So I just feel like Boisvert is an incredible pick. I know that a lot of people say Michael Hage because of his skill, one of the best workers in the entire draft class that was available at that time. Him, Trevor Connolly was available, and Cole Iserman. But I think the Blackhawks actually made the right choice with Boisvert. I think he locks in, solidifies himself as one of the middle six C's. I see him more as a 3C, but like an above average elite 3C. Do you think because the Blackhawks have so many players that could probably be in the top six or middle six, they're probably going to have to make a trade for a superstar. Where a lot of people talk about Kirill Kaprizov, I think he probably will re-sign with the Wild. But do you think that there is going to be that day just out of the blue one day, probably next year in the offseason, but that some of these guys get traded for that superstar to play on Bedard's line?
Yeah, I worry about sometimes guys are very prolific in college hockey or the CHL, whichever of the three leagues it is. It doesn't always work like that when you get to the NHL. You see a guy like Lucas Reichel, everyone's given up on him. They want him out. I'm like, Lucas Reichel is a very skilled player who could make a solid fourth line centerman. It's not going to work out where every high end prospect in your system that put up 1 billion points in their junior leagues or college is going to come to the NHL and just light it up. I see Ryan Green on the screen. He's a great example. I think he could be a fourth line winger or a fourth line center in the NHL. I actually have a piece for the Hockey News coming out soon about how the Blackhawks have the infrastructure to like build a really good bottom six from within. And I think that's part of it. If Boisvert reaches his potential in the NHL and he's Phil Deneau, that would be sensational. He's a gamer in the playoffs, Deneau, I'm talking about. You know, in the regular season, he'll get you 10 to 20 goals, but he'll go up against McDavid. And McDavid will say after the game, I hate playing the Kings because they're the only team who has a bottom six forward who I can't get away from. You know, because then if you find a way to get away from him, then you got Kopitar. You know, like it's those types of things where like you want guys like that in the bottom six. I think if Boisvert can find a way to become an NHL player, that's probably where he's going to end up, unless he's on a wing spot in the top six. But I think getting the most out of him, I'm with you. I think a third line center would be perfect. As far as trading for a superstar, yeah, that too. That's obviously going to be on the table. Kaprizov is either going to be out of Minnesota via free agency or he's going to re-sign. I really don't think I'll be shocked if he's traded because if he's traded ahead of the deadline this year, that means they think they're not going to be able to get a deal done and that they have no shot to make the playoffs. I would be surprised if either of those things happen, let alone both. Kaprizov's the greatest forward in Minnesota Wild history. I know Blackhawks fans don't really want them to be good at all, but I do think as a hockey fan, if I ignore all my biases and just think of only the sport of hockey, you want a guy like Kaprizov to stick with his team in Minnesota. I think sometimes seeing these guys, you see it in other sports, they go to Chicago or they go to New York or they go to Los Angeles. It's like it happens in baseball, especially. You're seeing it today. Only the Yankees, Dodgers are making trades. Like you want these teams in every market to have a chance. And we do see it because Florida's back-to-back champs. Utah's on the come up. We've seen Vegas come out of nowhere and join the NHL and be elite right away. I think if a guy like Kaprizov stays in Minnesota, it's good for the sport. If he hits free agency, you would think Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks are who especially can afford it in the coming up years because the Blackhawks have an advantage. Every team is going to see the cap rise and they're all going to want to spend. The Blackhawks already have a ton of cap space and they're just adding more with the cap rising. So I do think they would be in on Kaprizov next year's free agent class. It appears to be nasty right now. It appeared to be nasty going into last season too. And guys sign extensions with their teams throughout the season. It happens. McDavid's probably going to stay at Edmonton. If I were Jack Eichel, I would tie a ball and chain to my legs and not leave Vegas. Like I would do everything I can to stay on the Vegas Golden Knights if I'm Jack Eichel, especially when they're bringing in Mitch Marner, of course. And, so we'll see what the free agent class looks like. Making a trade, that depends on who becomes available. If I'm thinking about teams that are going to be, bad next year, I can't really say any of the guys that are like top guys on those teams that are going to be on expiring contracts are worth moving like, high end prospects. There'll probably be more of an offseason thing anyway, because the Blackhawks probably aren't going to be in buyer mode ahead of next deadline. So yeah, I'm all about drafting and developing prospects, and I'll make a trade when it's necessary. I just think it's going to be a while before I deem it as necessary for Chicago to consider something like that.
And the Blackhawks have been hiding cap space, which means like the Shea Weber trade. They obviously didn't get a lot of value with that trade, but that was so that they didn't have to basically overpay with term for free agents this year. You had that 8 million that you could just hide to get to the cap floor. And I do think that this is going to be a year where the Blackhawks probably do or are in that top 5 draft pick race again. And obviously there is some incredible prospects this year in the top five, and one of them is Gavin McKenna. You have Verhoff, who's a right-handed defenseman, and I don't know if the Blackhawks would necessarily do that, even though I think that he has the talent. I think he's incredible, but I don't know if it would be for the Blackhawks. You have guys like Ryan Robrick, who's 6'4", obviously a center, probably more of a center on this team, maybe a wing. But if Frondell is a wing, I think that he would probably be a center. But when you have so many top three picks, and then you probably are going to have a top five pick, do you think the Blackhawks have been, or do you think that they will target more upside with their next first round pick, early first round pick? Or do you think that it's going to continue to be like obviously, if Gavin McKenna's the pick, it's Gavin McKenna. But do you think that it's going to be more like higher upside players? Because Anton Frandell and Artem Levshinov kind of were like safer floor plays, but that do have upside. So what do you think of like the Blackhawks' ability to continue to draft top five? Do you think they're doing it correctly? Like what are your takes on this?
I actually do like Kyle Davidson's drafting up to this point. He's kind of had a mix of both. I think in the top 10, there has been a lot of, safe. This guy's going to be really good. Like his floor is still better than most NHL players, like Frondell, like Levshinov. Like if Levshinov were the number 5 defenseman on the Avalanche, he could be like on a cup team. Like and that's him right now at 19 years old or whatever. What is he going to be when he's 24? Is he going to be a number 1? Is he going to be a number 2? I think that's possible. Same thing with Frondell in terms of forwards. Their overall need in the organization is decreasing from what it was when Kyle first took over. When he first took over, it didn't matter. Best available, like, should be the option because you have needs everywhere. You weren't good on defense. You weren't good. You had Mackenzie Entwistle playing big minutes as a forward. You had holes everywhere. And now it's become where they've kind of built up a pretty nice young defense core where like they're going to be scratching the Louis Creviers of the world. Nolan Allen's probably not going to play every game. Wyatt Kaiser's a really good player. I think, he'll probably get scratched here and there. I still think if what's his name from North Dakota, Keaton Verhoff, is available, I would take him second overall, no matter who I am.
Yeah,
And then
I agree.
You can trade Del Mastro or Kaiser or Nolan Allen or, Crevier. Teams can always use young defensemen like that, and they'll give up middle 6 forwards. I would take Verhoff second overall regardless. Outside of that, I do kind of appreciate Kyle Davidson taking high upside picks at this stage of the rebuild because so far, so good. There's going to be missing. Not all the 11 picks in the first round since Kyle Davidson took over are going to be NHL players or like prominent NHL players. One of them likely will flame out and not be much in the NHL. But you took a swing on Sam Rinzel. Wow, look at how that's working out. This year, they took a big hack at Mason West, the quarterback. And if he turns out to be a really good hockey player and everything he says about looking at the ice like he's a quarterback, that does help him out, then that's going to look like a genius move. Why didn't every other team think of that? So if they have a top 5 pick again this year, I would make it, and I would swing for the fences for sure. If it's number 1 overall, you take McKenna and run.
Yeah.
That guy's a star.
Same with like Keaton Verhoff. Like I feel like there's not a lot of talk right now, but this guy's like a fourth forward out there. He kind of reminds me a lot of elite superstar defenseman. And it's just like his ability to be be a point producer as well as his defensive game and his size. I think there's going to be a lot of talk about this guy. I don't know if he's going to be able to catch McKenna because it's just an unfair year to be the number 1 or the runner up to the number 1 player because McKenna is obviously a superstar, elite, generational, all those words. But I think, say the Sharks are number 1. Is a team going to be able to entice, like, say the Sharks are number 1 and they obviously need defensemen, and then the Blackhawks are number 2 again. So, and the lottery comes and goes, and that's where it is. The Blackhawks could offer 2, 3 first round picks along with that, or like 2, 3 first round picks of value. And then the Sharks are looking there like, wow, we get Verhoff and all of these assets. I just think that right now it's McKenna, and I think it's going to continue to be. But going to like North Dakota, Verhoff is going to absolutely cook. I really do like Verhoff a lot. I think that he's going to be obviously the number two pick. I don't think it's going to be close when it's all said and done. The only problem with the Blackhawks here is that they have Rinzel and Artem Levshunov, who are both right-handed defensemen or right D. So it will be tough for him to be the third right D or Rinzel is the third or Artem Levshunov because there is so much. There are so many right Ds in the system. But can you talk to me a little bit about like what your reaction was when the Blackhawks took Vaslav Nestrasil, and were you a little like shocked or just excited because kind of Blackhawks Twitter has been on this guy for a little while now?
Yeah, I was surprised actually. I thought they would go for what's his name that went to the Islanders in the middle teens or late teens.
Oh,
Um,
so Eklund,
Aitchison.
Aitchison, yeah,
Aitchison. That's kind of the direction I thought the Blackhawks were going to go. Um, Eklund was off the board by the time the Blackhawks came up, right? That
yeah,
was
they
the
both
Islanders.
were.
Yeah,
It was back to back, Aitchison and Eklund.
they both were, and then they were gone, and they took Nestrasil, and I'm like, okay, I'm to the point where I'm not going to act like I watched all of Nestrasil's games. Was it the USHL he played in this last season?
Yeah, yep.
Muskegon, yeah, that's what it is. Shout out to the USHL. I hope they keep turning out prospects with guys being able to play college hockey after a couple years or a year or two in the CHL. I fear that league's gonna struggle, but as of right now, they're keep pumping out first round picks. I didn't watch a ton of his games. He wasn't known
Hmm.
like a Hagens or Porter Martone. These guys that went in the top 10, even some of the guys that had other stories like Mason West, the kid that went to Pittsburgh, what was it, 10th overall?
Yep.
Kindle, yeah,
11.
exactly. So my reaction is develop them. It's another big-bodied forward. That was a theme I think for the Blackhawks in the draft overall is how can we get bigger up front in organizationally, and yeah, hopefully it turns into become a good pick.
Yeah, so shout out Glenn Heffron, who's the USHL president commissioner. He's a friend of the program, and we obviously had just filmed a video together, and I really like the USHL. I think that it's a great development program for a lot of players. Like you said, the NCAA, as well as there's just so much money going into NIL. I do believe that USHL is a step like below for development, so that's good for them because they're not competing directly with the NCAA. It's kind of like the jump you take. But with Mason West also playing for the Fargo Force in the USHL, you see the Blackhawks have taken, I think, three first round picks lately with Boivois going from Muskegon and then Nestrasil, Muskegon, USHL both, and then Mason West. So the Blackhawks are not afraid to take that USHL development path because it's basically like taking a player a year early, where you see that with the Bears. I'm a big Bears fan. I actually was going to, I was picking between either scouting for NHL or NFL because I kind of knew more about the NFL draft than anything. But I've always known about both drafts, but I was like hyper focused in the 2023 draft with, Jalen Carter and all those guys. But one of the things that they've done is taken younger players that can develop, like Booker, Austin Booker. Austin Booker is one of those guys from Kansas that was probably not ready, but if you would have taken him in the year before, he would have been in the second round, maybe first round. But you got him in the fourth round because of that. So I really like what Kyle Davidson does. It's kind of basically like a Ryan Poles. You're taking guys that are projects because they are projects, but you're taking them a year early or maybe even 2 years early. You see that with Sam Renzel and Mason West, who are probably not like the most polished prospects when during their draft year. Mason West actually didn't even know it was his draft year this year because he was a junior in high school. He thought it was next year, it's his senior. And Sam Renzel was a high school player who obviously turned out to be incredible. So it's just only 47% of players that are drafted in the NHL draft actually play one game in the NHL, and then 10% play over 200. So it's just like take the risks, take those upside plays, take the younger players because you never know what's going to happen. So I really do like what Kyle Davidson has done. You're obviously seeing them take more meaty like size-based upside players where Vaslav and Mason West were both 6'6", and then you had like AJ Spelcy in the year before who was a football player. So I do really like what they're doing. Can you talk to me about like let's like go to a throwback here. obviously not too far down the line, but Connor Bedard during that lottery. Can you tell me about like what your emotions were when the Blackhawks jumped up to number one, and like how did you celebrate as a beat reporter for the Blackhawks?
I was excited because I knew it would change the way people perceive the Blackhawks again. Back to that 2022-23 season, they traded Kane. Taves' last game of the season against the Flyers. It did feel like the end of an era. And before they won the lottery, it was like going into that following year, it's like, wow, they're really, really going to take a step back and be pretty unwatchable. I say unwatchable. I would watch Pee Wee hockey. I would watch any hockey ever. But, and they're, what did they finish with, the third worst record? So you're thinking kind of in that Leo Carlson range, third overall, and then he ends up going second. So then you're like, thinking you're looking at Fantilli, or was it Kent? No, Kent Johnson was the year before.
No, it was Fantilio.
Yeah, but
Will Smith.
Fourth? Will Smith, exactly.
Or
then
Mitch Koff. Honestly, the Blackhawks.
I feel that
Maybe.
way too. I feel that way too. And it turned out to be a pretty good draft. I love Leonard. I love Gabe Perreault. Right, that was Boston college kids, just absolute studs. I was a big fan of Gavin Brindley. I was pissed when he fell to the second round.
Me too.
And so, but yeah, when they won the lottery, it was like, okay, Bedard's going to come in, and they have a face again. He's not going to be a superstar player right away. I don't even know if McKenna will be a McDavid or a Matthews right away, because I just think we kind of play in an NHL again where that's not. I'm not going to say it's not possible, because if I say it's not possible, McKenna will come in and have 150 points. People will clip this and then send it to me and call me mean names. But I just don't think anybody comes in and scores 40 goals anymore. It takes time. It takes development. Most of the time, good players are drafted by bad teams for a reason, especially. And so I was just happy that they have a face off the ice that people can kind of, because I want hockey to be just as popular in Chicago as baseball and football and basketball. Bulls best attendance in the league. I want it to be as popular as those. And I think with a guy like Bedard in the mix, following guys like Taves and Kane and Keith and Seabrook and Yalmerson, it's good for the franchise. So I knew they had a player to build around. It was just a matter of how they're going to develop him. What's his position long term? What's his ceiling long term? But I knew right away that it would be a really, really good thing for the organization to win that lottery and build around Bedard going forward.
So I wanted to build like just the rosters for the lines just like quickly. But before I do so, like let's say the Blackhawks got third and took Mitchkov. Do you think that the Blackhawks would have taken Demidov too to pair both of those up with the second overall pick instead of Levshinov?
I think it would depend. It would depend on what Michkov's intentions were. I do think depending on what team takes him, it's not parallel with whether or not he comes over as quickly as he did. Philly must have, and I know Keith Jones and Danny Briere were like all over it from day one. Would Kyle Davidson and, guys in charge over there, would they have been as all in on it? They had Torts, right? I'm sure he played a factor. He's not there anymore. I know they didn't really jive as far as coach player once the actual games started. But so I wonder if that would have changed things. I assume there's a possibility like, oh, we have Michkov, let's take Demidov. But I think the need for Levshinov was a little more apparent, because also at the time we didn't know what Rinzel was. So there are a lot of factors that I think would go into it. I do think it would have been a conversation.
All right, so to close out the show, I pulled up the lines. These are just the projected forward lines. Do you see like somebody that's not there, maybe like a Lucas Reichel or just fill in the blank that should be in these lineups? And do you think like Burakovsky, Bedard, and Donato, Bertuzzi, Nazar, and Teravainen are going to be the top six this year?
I do think that's the top six. It wouldn't shock me if by the end of the year Burakovsky or Bertuzzi get bumped out for a younger guy. I would start Moore in the AHL. He would be playing for the Ice Hogs if I were in charge for the first 20 or so games, and then see how he does. Similar to what they did with Nazar. I think Moore's a better skater, but Nazar's got a better offensive ceiling. I don't see on that list, they don't project Nick Lardis to make the team out of camp. I think there's a chance. If he comes into the preseason and he continues to snipe the way that he does, And I know NHL goalies are different. I know NHL defenses are different, systems, all that. He's not gonna have, 70 goals in year one. He probably won't have 30. He probably won't have 20 if he were to play all 82 games. But I do think he can skate and he can score. And the Blackhawks need a little bit of that in the bottom six. I'd be surprised if he has a good camp in preseason if he doesn't make the team. There's no reason for him not to. But if he's a little slow in preseason and training camp and all that, and he's clearly got some catching up to do, then sure, start him in the AHL. I'm all about it. I love the AHL. But yeah, I think for the most part, give or take, I don't love Lafferty playing over Reichel at
Mhm.
all. Um, Landon Slaggert may make the team. I like his juice. I like his energy. Mikheyev makes the team if he's healthy, I think. 20 goals last year, nice bounce back. He had some high upside, I remember, when he was with the Leafs. I like Donato up on the top line with Burakovsky and Bedard, but we'll see how long Burakovsky sticks around. So, yeah, I guess I don't really have a problem with the top six on this group. It's more the bottom six that I think will have some interchanging parts throughout the season.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Nick Lardis because I completely agree. The Blackhawks are in need of goal scoring, and that guy put up incredible goal scoring numbers. So I want to close out like a Hot Ones video. Cameras here, here, and here. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you got coming up next, and just overall, articles that you say you're going to be posting. Because you said you're going to be posting a Ryan Green one, I believe. So just tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm working on one right now about the bottom six and like the long-term trajectory of the bottom six. Whether it's keeping Lucas Reichel, you have Green. I think Oliver Moore is good. Slaggert is a real good possibility for a bottom six forward long term. I'm a huge fan of AJ Spellacy. I think with some development, he could be a high-end bottom six forward for the Blackhawks. Other than that, just general covering the team. I'll be at the United Center this year. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone back at the UC. So, yeah, you can find me on the Hockey News, the Blackhawks website for the Hockey News. And then if you're looking for some Bears coverage here and there, I'm at the Bears Wire for USA Today. You can find all those links on my Twitter. And just every day, I try to keep that Twitter constantly turning out something for people to read. So, I appreciate the time very much, and I'm
Mhm.
a very big fan of what you're doing. And keep going with some of these high end interviews. Sometimes I see interviews from you. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's doing it. So keep it going, keep having fun with it, and keep the grind going.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. And definitely check out everything. I'm going to link all the descriptions or everything in the description. So definitely, just check that out. And yeah, peace out, everybody. Leave a like and subscribe and comment down below where you guys think the Blackhawks are going to finish this year. So thank you guys.